Massive shifts are happening over at Disney and Pixar right now, with the following quote coming from the creative officer of Pixar's. "We're making a movie, not hundreds of millions of dollars of therapy." Again, those words comes from Pete Docter, creative professor over at Pixar, and in my mind officially declares once and for all that the Disney/Pixar LGBTQIA+ agenda is dead and gone. Finally, and long overdue, as for quite a few years now we've been covering this. Disney has been attempting to appeal to the progressive crowd through ever more strident measures, and whenever these attempts failed, and miserably so, the cry from the progressives inside of the house was, "You just didn't give us enough, it wasn't progressive enough, it wasn't woke enough, the wider audience didn't wake up to it, you've got to give us more power." And in the end, Disney did with The Acolyte, which gave them everything they wanted, not a straight white man in sight, the entire cast being incredibly diverse, female, racially, everything they could ever possibly desired, and it too practically killed Star Wars. As it turns out, this audience didn't exist. And now, with another Pixar movie about silly little animals doing silly little things in their own silly little animal ethno-state, appearing to be one of their biggest successes in recent history, the lesson has finally sunk in. As I remind you as well, one of their other greatest successes recently was Inside Out 2 as well, a movie in which they specifically trimmed out a lesbian romance with the underage main character. Even the example given in this article here of Elio was also a movie that underwent heavy editing to remove as much of the LGBTQIA+ blah 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 agenda as humanly possible. It wasn't enough to save a dogshit script, however, and the movie was an enormous flop. But still, the massive recuts, which we've discussed in the past, were indeed a huge disappointment to Pixar. Some of Pixar, which has gender-neutral bathrooms and a history of supporting LGBT. I like the fact that we are removing all of the other numbers now and letters. Employees. They were further discouraged by the removal of references to a character being transgender in a Disney Plus series called Win or Lose. Indeed. So, Disney has, ever since The Acolyte, been pruning heavily at their studio and at Pixar, even internally. And this has had a bit of a long-term history here. So this comes from the article, "Disney needs its next hit franchise. Can Pixar's reluctant leader deliver?" And he has one very powerful and interesting piece of insight. Namely, this. "As time goes on, I realize my job is to make sure the film appeals to everybody." Now, that's a phrase we've heard before. Everybody. It must be for everyone and therefore to no one, right? But what he's actually saying here isn't the woke progressive everybody. It is the actual everybody. He is referring to the majority, the people who come to watch Pixar movies, families, normal people. Instead of attempting to, with movies like Elio, appeal to 0.5% of the population that somehow believe they've been born in the wrong body, or that small portion of the population that has made their sexuality their entire defining feature and core to their personality, instead Pixar will yet again try to appeal to everybody. The actual everybody. And this conflict has been going on for quite some time, with of course a few years ago, well it's been a while now, like 4 or 5 years ago, Disney's bosses promised huge increases in queer characters in a major step for LGBTQ blah 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 representation. We also of course had rather famously one of Disney's creative directors coming out to say that she was just inserting the gay and the agenda wherever she could. This was the era of the activist as Disney, and it's did not go well at all, leading in fact to a rather large confrontation with Disney's board there, and Disney was sweating bullets as it seemed as if they might be in for a hostile takeover. Now, that did not happen, mind you, but very clearly Disney understood that it was bleeding, and all of the blood was getting into the water all over the place, and a lot of suspect characters were quite clearly picking up on the aroma and moving in for the kill. Simultaneously, after multiple flops of their own and just the general collapse of woke entertainment as a rule, with even a recent example from like literally yesterday. The Bride was, ditched, as it earned, what was it? Let's see here, $7.3 million opening, domestic, from a $100 million budget. Oh, I wonder why could that be the case? The Bride, a feminist reimagining of The Bride of Frankenstein, has collapsed in its box office debut. And then we have the actress herself come out and saying, misogynistic reactions can't stop feminist Frankenstein, reinventing The Bride from being one of the boldest, from being one of the boldest studio movies ever. See, the thing is, bold is not for everybody. It never was for everybody. The LGBT blah 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 agenda was never for everybody. Activists within these companies convinced the companies that they were the majority, that if only they were given a little bit more power, they would finally break into that wider market, who would be infinitely more sustainable than those weirdo geeks and parents who watched cartoons. Oh no, we must aim for the politically aware crowd, the auteurs, those people who like bold, imaginative movies about feminism instead of anything actually fun. And remarkably enough, for a good 10 years there, that was what everybody was aiming towards, as again, it is impossible to overstate what an absolute stranglehold on culture wokeism and radical feminism had. Just 10 years ago, it was everything. It was our morality, it was the norm, until it started to aggress upon literally everyone, and proved that it didn't actually have that much of a actual movie-going audience, or people who bought books, or video games, or anything else, frankly. And now, again, this is pretty much Disney declaring that they're done with all of it. They can make stupid movies about fluffy animals playing with each other. In this case, it's a woman's brain trapped inside of a silly little hamster who's out there to prevent a damming building or something. And they can do this in the classical formula. The classical Disney movie is majoritively cute, fluffy, dumb characters like this. A simple story, good versus evil, and they usually then add in just a pinch of relevant politics, a very small amount, morality in essence, and, well, the majority of people are not pro-pollution. Obviously, if they can make a happy, fluffy singing dance about lots of silly little animals who are threatened by a dam or whatever is the problem here, then the majority of people will go, oh, the silly hamsters are threatened. How very, very terrible. This is the classic storytelling of Disney Pixar, and it's all they really need to do. Again, the problem here too from Pixar is, and one of the reasons why they are turning so sharply away from this, is that once upon a time, they basically had a monopoly on this sort of entertainment in the West, and they figured they could ride on this monopoly forever. But, well, again, as their actual creative output continued to stagnate more and more, and China basically looked at the art style and thought, we can just copy that. It's not even that difficult. And they did copy that, and it wasn't all that difficult, with one of the recent major box office successes globally being a Chinese animated movie, appears to finally actually have shook Pixar out of their reverie. They have finally awoken. Now, whether or not that is too late is a good question, as Hoppers 2, mind you, had an opening weekend of, what was it here, $46 million, which is pretty good. It's pretty damn good, relatively speaking, but, it's very far away from what Disney and Pixar were once pulling in, almost purely based on their name and brand recognition alone. The question really is if these companies have done enough damage to their reputation to the point where it can no longer be salvaged. Now, unfortunately, I pretty much do believe that the movie-going audience is, in large part like the video gaming audience, far too lenient. It's why this took 10 years to rectify to begin with. If Pixar begins actually putting out decent stuff with a minimum of the political nonsense in it, as I'm sure as they continue to purge the activists, there will still be a little bit here and there, then they'll probably actually recover. Now, the opposite side is, of course, that whether or not those activists will be able to control themselves, or if they will become emboldened by the little pieces they'll undoubtedly work in here and there, or if they'll simply just be purged outright, or they already have been purged. Because, we talked about this when the news broke that Pixar had censored large blocks of the movie's LGBTQIA+ agenda. And there were a lot of people at Pixar at the time then saying that they wanted to quit. I've mentioned repeatedly that one of the biggest issues with getting rid of the activists within these companies is that many modern companies have, shall we say, generous contracts for their employees, making them practically unfireable under normal circumstances. Well, one easy way to start getting rid of them is to continuously do things to them that they really dislike. I'm not saying that producing an entire LGBT movie solely to cut it up into pieces and remove every last trace of it to bully the employees out of the company is necessarily a sound financial decision, but I am saying it would be an effective and funny one. But still, we are making movies, not therapy. Welcome back, Disney. Let's see what you've got to offer, shall we? As again, here's the thing too. I am not at all opposed to offering forgiveness to certain companies. I genuinely am not. Do they screw us over? Absolutely. But whilst there is absolutely the need for some retribution here and there, I do not wish to be like the left in this, as the left's main weakness was that it would continuously push away and alienate even those who were vehemently for it and doing things in its favor, spreading its propaganda and its messaging. If Disney is willing to come crawling to the cross and start spreading our stuff, our morality, you know, the stuff that sold to begin with, I'm pretty much fine with that. But there's a lot of ifs before that's going to happen. So, until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon.